How long we live does not matter. The only thing that matters is how well we live. Now, I'm currently in Switzerland doing a hike in the Alps, and this topic has been weighing heavy on my mind. I had a long travel day by train yesterday, and I was reading some Seneca, and he brought up an amazing point. And he said how no amount of time will ever be enough if your mind is not correctly orientated in knowing that your life is going to come to an end. It'll always be, it's not just, oh, I need one more year. It's you need your mind right. And I can think of no better way of living well than doing, as the Stoics say, living in accordance with your nature. Now, I also really like Ralph Waldo Emerson, and in his essay on self-reliance, he says, traveling is a fool's paradise. And that's always stuck with me. And I believe he's right. But I'm currently backpacking in Europe. And I still believe traveling is a fool's paradise. But I also believe one must live in accordance with their nature. And that if you are doing that, I believe you can die at any moment content with the fact that you know you're walking your path. You know you're doing what your brain, or not even what your brain, but what your soul, what the still small voice is telling you to do. When I was working a job I didn't like and I wanted to travel, I also really like the quote from Marcus Aurelius where he says, imagine you could leave life at any moment. Let that determine what you do, say, and think. And I always went back to the fact that I just wasn't content with dying at that time because I was working a job I didn't like. I was spending 40 plus hours a week working a job I didn't like. How can I be content with dying doing that? And it's not even the fact that I was working a job I didn't like. It was the fact that I was working a job I didn't like at 22 years old when I didn't have to, when I had more than enough money to do this. And that was just from 4 years of working. And I don't need to get into that too much, but I don't spend that much money. So it was not like I needed to have that job. Yes, we live in a society where, you need food, you need money. You need money to buy things to keep you alive, more or less. I mean, I know technically you can kind of live off the land and, but technically, you kind of need money. But at 22 years old, in the let's just take this in for a second. But at 22 years old, when I was just not needing to, it was just, I wasn't living in accordance with my nature. And it's really hard to find meaning in life. And it's really hard to say, I am content if today is my last day, when you were doing that. But as I was on the train yesterday, reading Seneca, and he said that, he said, no amount of time is going to give you, it's not like you hit, 80 years and then you're just, I'm content, take me away. It's the mind that does it. It's the mind that allows you to be content. And I believe that comes with living in accordance with your nature. And as I was on the train yesterday, and I read that, I thought, you know, I could die today and I'd be pretty happy. You know, there's not because I'm fed up with life, not because there's not still things I want to do, not still people I want to help, not still unkind people I want to be kind to. None of those reasons. But because in that moment I realized I was living in accordance with my nature. And I was following my... It's not good. I was following my... I was following my heart. You know, I was listening to the still small voice. Now, I'm just gonna hold this. I've had an on and off relationship with God, you know. You know, Jordan Peterson has his book, We Who Wrestle with God. And I definitely wrestle with God. But I'm coming to believe that, you know, God is the still small voice. And I'm not even the person who said that. You know, 5,000 years ago, I think it was Jonah, or it might have been Elijah in the Bible, in the Old Testament. And he said, you know, there was the wind and God was not there. You know, there was the thunder and God was not there. You know, there was the water and God was not there. But then there was the still small voice and God was there. And I've always loved that, because I do believe the still small voice is God. And that's why I'll think we all have a God in us. And he's our mentor. You know, we seek mentors in the external world. And, you know, Carl Jung said, we all seek mentors in the external world, but we don't realize that we literally have a mentor that was specialized for us to help us, guide us. And it's the still small voice. And I see no reason not to believe that's God, because it tells you things you don't want to hear. It's often not convenient to listen to, and virtue isn't convenient. And I think, you know, the Stoics, living in accordance with your nature comes to us from the Stoics. And I think they, you know, there's some metaphysical doctrines in Stoicism, you know, like the Logos and things like that. And I think technically there's a little bit of like doctrine, if you will, with living in accordance with your nature. But I don't think the true Stoics believe that. Or maybe they did, but I think they would have summed it up more to just listening to that still small voice. Because I wrestled with what it meant, well, for a long time, to live in accordance with your nature. And I've now come to the conclusion that it's that. And I don't know, I like to believe that pure evil does not exist. And I think if people just listen to that still small voice, the world would be a good place. And the world already is a good place. There's bad things that happen. There's bad things that happen, but there's good things as well. And, you know, it's like in the book Rules for a Night, you know, they talk about how, you know, someone comes up to the two knights and they say, how are the people in the town ahead? The place we just came from. Or no, he asked, how were the people in the place you just came from? And they say, oh, they were the worst. They were horrible. They were rude. Worst type of people imaginable. And he says, you'll find more of the same in the town up ahead. And they thank him and they move on. And then a little later in the day, another group comes and they ask the same question. How are the people in the town up ahead? And he says, how are the people in your town? And they say, oh, they were wonderful. We were so sad that we had to leave. It's just circumstances required it. But truly, they were some of the best people. And he says, you will find more of the same in the village to come. And they thank him. And I think that just means you get what you look for. If you look for the worst in this world, you will find it. But if you look for the best, you will also find it. As always, we're a little off topic, but I just really want to hammer home that point that it isn't how long you live that matters, because no amount of time will ever be enough for a mind that is unsettled, for a mind that is not content in itself. No time will ever be enough. And I think how you get there is through living in accordance with your nature, whatever that is. Like I said, my rational brain tells me traveling is a fool's paradise. But the still small voice, my soul, my heart, tells me to go. And I think there's a beautiful quote I heard it's not by Robert Edward Grant, but he's the one who said it. When you think with your heart and feel with your brain, the river of wisdom will flow. I've always loved that. It's a beautiful quote. And I try to do more of that. There's also, I'm sorry I was just like throw quotes at you guys also. I swear I try not to. But they just pop into my head. But that just proves that I am not wise. Because I have to quote wise people to get my points across. I don't understand. I just memorize. But I think also true wisdom is realizing that you never become wise. You just become less like a fool. And this is a point Seneca makes time and time again. He's just saying to himself and to Lucilius, the guy he writes his letters to, just rid yourself of one ill today. If you do that, you're on an amazing path. You'll never get rid of them all. New ones will come up often. But the goal should be to just get 1% better every day. But yeah, the quote I was going to say is it's from a song Kids by Current Joy. And don't listen to your brain, follow your dreams. And I think sometimes you got to do that. Here's another quote, because I'm not wise, by David Foster Wallace. The mind is a great servant, but a horrible master. The mind is to serve us, but the mind can also destroy you. And I think that's why a lot of people shoot themselves in the head. They shoot the cruel master. But I think we should all focus more on living well instead of living long. Yes, both are. Both are wanted. I've never heard anyone say living long is a vice. But to sacrifice virtue, to sacrifice living in accordance with your nature, just so you can die at an old age, is foolish. It's foolish. So, live in accordance with your nature. Listen to your heart. Trust that everything happens for a reason, and that reason is for the best. And have faith that when you listen to your heart and feel with your brain, the river of wisdom will start to flow.